Let me tell you about a phone call I got on a Tuesday afternoon, about 6 years ago. A woman named Barbara, 71 years old, sharp as a tack, loved her son more than anything in this world, called my office in tears. She said, "My son hasn't returned my calls in 3 weeks. I don't know what I did." So I asked her, "What was the last thing you said to him?" She thought about it. And she told me, "I just said something about how his wife keeps him on a short leash." I was joking. Except her son didn't hear a joke. He heard his mother disrespecting the woman he chose to build a life with. And he didn't know what to do with that, so he did the easiest thing. He stopped calling. Now, I've been a family psychologist for over 40 years. I've sat across from thousands of parents, good, loving, well-meaning parents, who couldn't understand why their adult son was pulling away. And in the vast majority of those cases, the distance didn't start with a big fight. It started with a sentence. Just one sentence that seemed harmless at the time. Today, I'm going to share with you 5 of those sentences. 5 things you should never say to your son about his wife. And more importantly, I'll give you the exact words to say instead. Words that keep your relationship strong without asking you to be someone you're not. If you're watching this channel for the first time, welcome to Strong Elderly Life. We talk about the stuff that actually matters after 60. Your health, your family, your peace of mind. So hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and stay with me to the end. Because the last thing I'll share with you today is a rule I call the Golden Bridge, and it might just save the most important relationship in your life. Let's get into it. Before we get to the 5 sentences, I need you to understand something. And I need you to hear this without taking it personally, because it's not a criticism. It's just how healthy human development works. When your son got married, something shifted. Psychologists call it the process of leaving and cleaving. Your son's primary loyalty, his first emotional allegiance, transferred from you to his wife. That's not a betrayal. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. That's what you raised him to do. You raised him to be a man capable of committing to another person. And he did. Now here's where the trouble starts. When you say something negative about his wife, even casually, even as a joke, you create what we call a loyalty bind. You're putting your son in a position where he feels he has to choose between 2 people he loves. His mother or his wife. His past or his future. And I want to be very honest with you. When a man feels forced to choose, he will almost always choose his wife. Not because he loves you less, but because his marriage is his daily life, his home, his present and future. That's where he lives. That's where he wakes up every morning. So the goal is simple: never make him choose. Because the moment you force that choice, you've already lost. Let me show you the 5 most common ways parents accidentally force that choice, and what to do instead. This one is so common. And I understand why parents say it. You remember your son before marriage? Maybe he was more spontaneous, maybe he called more often, maybe he watched football with you every Sunday. And now things are different. So you say it. She's changed you. But here's what your son actually hears. "I don't like who you are now, and I blame your wife for it." That's a double wound. You're rejecting his current self and attacking his partner in the same breath. I had a client I'll call Thomas. Retired engineer. Wonderful man. He told his son, "Michael, you used to be so fun. Ever since you married Sarah, you're always stressed and serious." Thomas meant it as concern. But Michael heard it as, "My dad thinks my wife ruined me." Michael tried to explain, "Dad, I'm not different because of Sarah. I have a mortgage now. I have responsibilities. I'm growing up." But Thomas kept circling back to it. "You were happier before." And eventually, Michael stopped explaining. He just stopped coming around as much. It was easier than defending his entire life every holiday. Here's the truth. Your son has changed. Of course he has. He's supposed to. Change is the sign of a life being lived. And most of the time, his wife didn't change him. Life did. Responsibility did. Parenthood did. He evolved into a different version of himself, and that version still has room for you if you let it. Say this instead: I'm still getting to know this version of you, and I want to. Tell me what matters to you these days. That one sentence does something powerful. It says, I see you. I accept you. I'm curious about your life. And you haven't lost your son. You've just been introduced to the man he's becoming. Oh, this one. I hear this in my office at least once a week. A parent leans in and says, I don't want to overstep, but, and then proceeds to overstep in the most spectacular way possible. Here's the problem. That little disclaimer at the beginning? It doesn't protect anyone. It's like saying no offense right before you say something offensive. The listener doesn't hear the disclaimer. They hear what comes after but. I don't want to interfere, but I think she spends too much money. I'm just being honest. I don't think she disciplines the kids properly. No offense, but she could make more of an effort with this family. Every single one of those sentences puts your son in the position of being a translator. He now has to go home and either defend his mother to his wife or defend his wife to his mother. Either way, he's exhausted. And eventually, he starts avoiding the situations that cause the conflict, which means avoiding you. I worked with a couple, let's call them Jim and Karen. Jim's mother would visit and say things like, I'm just being honest, your wife could keep a cleaner house. Jim's wife, Karen, would hear about it and feel humiliated. Not because the house was messy, it was fine, but because she felt watched and judged in her own home. After a while, Karen told Jim she didn't want his mother visiting anymore. And Jim, caught in the middle, said okay. Because his peace at home mattered more than managing his mother's opinions. Jim's mother wasn't a bad person. She genuinely believed she was being helpful. But helpful is defined by the person receiving it, not the person giving it. Say this instead: I trust you both to figure this out, but if you ever want a sounding board, I'm here. This works because it does two things. It communicates respect and it keeps the door open. You're saying, I believe in your ability to handle your own life, and I'm available if you want me. That's an invitation, not an intrusion. And invitations get accepted. Intrusions get shut down. This might be the most devastating sentence on this list. And paradoxically, it often comes from the deepest love. You see your son struggling in his marriage. Maybe they're arguing more. Maybe he seems tired, frustrated, unhappy. And your heart breaks because this is your child, and you want him to be happy. So you say, sweetheart, you deserve better than this. But here's what happens psychologically when you say that. If his marriage is actually going well, and they're just in a rough patch, which every marriage goes through, he hears you say, I've already decided your wife isn't good enough. And he gets angry, because you've dismissed his choice and his commitment. If his marriage is genuinely struggling, this is the more dangerous scenario. He might initially feel validated. But then something worse happens. He stops talking to you about his problems. Because now he knows that every time he shares a struggle, you'll use it as evidence against his wife. You've become unsafe. He can't vent to you anymore because venting will be treated as a verdict. I had a father, I'll call him Richard, who told his son Daniel, I just don't think she's the right one for you, son. Richard said it once. Just once. But Daniel told me in our session, after that, I never told my dad anything real about my marriage again, because I knew anything negative would become ammunition. Richard lost his role as his son's confidant. Not because Daniel was angry, but because Daniel no longer felt safe. Say this instead: marriage is hard sometimes. I'm proud of you for working at it. How are you holding up? This sentence is a gift. It normalizes struggle. It honors effort. And it ends with an open door. How are you holding up? A question that invites honesty without steering the answer. You become the safe harbor, not the judge. I know this feels harmless. I know it feels like small talk, like excitement, like a perfectly natural thing for a parent to ask. But I'm telling you, after 40 years of sitting with families in pain, this question has caused more silent damage than almost any other. Here's why. You don't know what's happening behind closed doors. You don't know if they've been trying for 2 years and it's not working. You don't know if she's had a miscarriage that she hasn't told anyone about. You don't know if they've decided not to have children and they're dreading telling you. You don't know if this topic is the source of the biggest argument in their marriage right now. And every time you ask, you poke a wound you can't see. I counseled a young couple, early 30s. They'd been trying to conceive for 3 years. They'd gone through 2 rounds of IVF. The wife had suffered a miscarriage at 14 weeks. They told no one. And every Sunday dinner, the husband's mother would say something. So, any news? You know, I'm not getting any younger. Your sister already has 2. Each time, the wife would excuse herself to the bathroom. Each time she was crying. And each time, a little piece of the relationship between this mother and her son's family broke off and drifted away. When they finally did have a child, the wife told me, "I love my mother-in-law, but I'll never forget how those years felt. She made the hardest time of my life harder without even knowing it." This extends beyond children, by the way. Any comment about their private decisions, how they spend their money, where they choose to live, whether she works or stays home, falls into this territory. It's their marriage. These are their choices to make together. Say this instead: I love our family exactly as it is right now. 9 words. That's all it takes. 9 words that say, I'm not waiting for something. I'm not expecting something. I'm happy with what we are, right now, today. You have no idea how much pressure that single sentence lifts off your son and his wife's shoulders. This is the generational comparison trap. And I understand the impulse. You draw from your experience, from what worked for you, from the world you knew. But when you compare your daughter-in-law to yourself or to the standards of your generation, something breaks. Your daughter-in-law hears, "I'm being measured against a yardstick I never agreed to." Your son hears, "My parents think we're doing everything wrong." And both of them hear, "The past was better, you are worse." A woman I counseled, I'll call her Margaret, used to tell her son, "When your father and I were your age, I had dinner on the table at 6 every night. I didn't need to order takeout 3 times a week." She wasn't trying to be cruel. She was genuinely proud of how she ran her household. But her daughter-in-law, who worked 50 hours a week as a nurse, heard that and felt like a failure. And she resented it. And the resentment didn't stay aimed at Margaret. It seeped into the marriage. Her son started feeling guilty every time his wife ordered takeout. Margaret's helpful comparison became a pebble in their shoe that irritated every step. The world your son lives in is not the world you lived in. Housing costs are different. Work expectations are different. Gender roles have shifted. None of that is wrong. It's just different. And the moment you use your past as a measuring stick for their present, you're telling them that different means lesser. Say this instead: times are different, and I think you two are navigating it well. This one sentence does something remarkable. It acknowledges the gap between generations without making it a competition. It says, "I see that your challenges are real and different from mine, and I respect how you're handling them." That's not surrender. That's wisdom. And wisdom at our age is the most powerful thing we have to offer. All right. I promised you a rule. One principle that ties everything together. I call it the Golden Bridge Rule, and I've been teaching it to parents in my practice for the last 20 years. Here it is. Before you say anything to your son about his wife, his marriage, or his family, ask yourself one question. Does this sentence build a bridge between me and them, or does it burn one? That's it. That's the whole rule. She's changed you. Does that build or burn? It burns. I trust you both to figure this out. Build or burn? It builds. You deserve better. Burn. I'm proud of you for working at it. Build. Every conversation is either a brick added to the bridge or a match held to the rope. And at our age, let me be real with you, we don't have unlimited time to rebuild bridges we've burned. The relationship with your son and his family is one of the most precious things you have left. It's not worth sacrificing for the satisfaction of being right. And here's the thing I want you to sit with. You don't have to agree with everything your son and his wife do. That's not what I'm asking. You can disagree privately. You can have your own opinions. But the question is, what matters more to you? Being right or being close? In 40 years, I have never once seen a parent win an argument with their adult child's spouse and keep the relationship intact. Not once. But I've seen hundreds of parents bite their tongue, choose the bridge, and get rewarded with decades of Sunday dinners, phone calls, and grandchildren crawling into their laps. The bridge is always worth more than being right. So let me leave you with this. Your son didn't leave you when he got married. He expanded his life. He added someone to it. And there is still a place at that table for you, a big, important place, if you choose your words with the same love you've always felt. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to walk on eggshells. You just need to ask yourself that one question before you speak. Build or burn. If this video made you think about a conversation you've had, or one you need to have, share it with a friend who might need to hear it too. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Strong Elderly Life. Every week we talk about how to live this chapter of life with strength, wisdom, and the people we love still beside us. Next week, I'll be sharing 3 signs your adult child is pulling away, and how to bring them back without begging. You won't want to miss it. Until then, be kind to yourself. Be kind to your family. And remember, the bridge is always worth it. I'll see you in the next one.